Hello, everyone, and welcome, one and all, to another exciting, informative, and always dumb episode of Andy Explains It All. I'm your host, Andy, who puts the Andy in Andy Explains It All. And with me, as
It's true.
always,
You do.
the ever present, reliable, and equally, if not more so dumb than I am, Stephen Fontana. Stephen, welcome
Oh, hey,
to
man.
this week's episode.
Very happy to be here. Happy to
Yeah?
happy to be learning again with all of our listeners and our viewers here on YouTube.com/DualScreensTV. It's going to be a great episode.
We've
Very
had
excited.
we've had some success. Recently, I saw some comments on our Parasite Eve episode on YouTube, and I made a new friend who had a shared admiration for horror games,
Hmm.
Overblood in particular, was a huge fan favorite of mine. So we may have to extend this series
Uh
as
huh.
for a bonus after the finale, but that's up in the air. But for those who are new to this show, it is a special, limited, seasonal content series where I, Andy, the smartest dummy, explains to Steven, the dumbest dummy, a topic of his choosing.
Hmm.
Now, this posts each and every other Friday on your podcast service of choice, including Spotify and iHeartRadio, and also on YouTube
Indeed.
and our website, dualscreens.com.
Yes.
But we also have two other flagship shows. That's the Dual Screens Gamescast and the Dual Screens podcasts. And those post on Monday and Thursday, respectively. If you want to support this great show and all we do, patreon.com/NDS podcast for your monies. If you got some of that, trying times, I know. But the best way to support us is to share us on Twitter, Facebook with your friends, family, loved ones, estranged relatives, or your enemies.
Especially
Because
your enemies.
yeah,
Those are the ones we like
if
the
you don't
most.
like us, then you can just this is a great podcast that I found. You should totally check it out. And feedback, concerns, complaints, love
Yeah.
notes can all be sent to feedback@ndspodcast.com. Steven, let's get into this
Whoa,
week's
whoa, whoa, whoa.
topic.
First of all, if you're going to support us on Patreon, you could do it just like our Patreon producer, Colton the Apprentice Nestler. Let's
Oh,
not
we got
forget
a
about
producer.
Don't forget about our
Yes.
producer.
I was trying to go like as much off book as possible with this intro.
Well, you almost got there.
I almost got there, but no mumbling, no stuttering. It was all nice and clear
Yeah,
and
it was nice and clear.
good.
So I don't know, listeners, if you tell me, like, so we've been having a lot of audio sync issues with our videos. So like, I'm completely anal about this now, this episode. So I hope it's good for you guys because
Yeah.
I've been trying to do a lot of work on getting this thing fantastic. But Andy, that's not the only stuff that we have on DualScreens.com. We also are in the middle of a huge rollout of our PAX East 2020 coverage. So right now, if you go to YouTube.com/DualScreensTV, which is probably where you're watching this right now, I would hope, or if you're listening, just head over to our YouTube channel, give us a subscription because we have 32 on the show floor interviews going up. We have 6 of them up right now. We have another 7 that are going to go up this week. Hopefully another 7 after that towards the end of the week next week. So we have plenty of content ready for you. So please hit that subscribe button now. Andy, this week
Yes.
I chose a topic that I thought you would have fun with, but I also am genuinely curious to know more about. And that's usually how I pick these topics.
Mm,
Um, I want something that you're passionate about, but at the same
mm,
time, I want something that I feel like you'll be also good at teaching.
mm.
And
Yes.
one of those things I felt was pretty obvious, and that is going to be Wes Craven, which is what this show is all about. Now, Wes Craven, why did I pick Wes Craven? I mean, it's
Yeah,
pretty
that
obvious.
was a really because I mentioned to you doing a deep dive in Nightmare on Elm Street
Hmm.
as a potential topic, but then you threw me this curveball, which it's kind of in the same arena, but not really because Wes Craven did a lot more than just Nightmare.
Right. And
Most of it wasn't great.
right. And I'm pretty ignorant to a lot of what Wes Craven has done.
Mhm.
I get Wes Craven and John Carpenter always confused.
Oh, okay. So this could
Always
be a
get them
really,
confused.
really good teaching moment for you, Mr. Fontana.
Right, which is why we're
This is
doing,
gonna be a lot of fun.
which is why Andy Explains It All was created to begin
Yes.
with. As I'm untangling a million wires, this right now would give Wes Craven the
Uh,
willies,
a
tangled
nightmare.
wires I
Yeah.
have on this end of my screen. But I have to do it because I can't move my microphone without tugging on like 10 other wires.
Mhm.
So, Andy, without further ado, you now know why I picked this topic. Now, I want you to set us up.
So we mentioned in the onset that a big part of Wes Craven, well, he's synonymous with Freddy Krueger. That's like the obvious. It's the obvious.
Right.
And do you see my little thing back here? My little Freddy. These are actually sweatpants.
Freddy Krueger
Back here.
sweatpants.
Yes, they're Freddy sweater styled sweatpants.
Okay.
And there is a. I'm just gonna grab them for a hot second. There is a little. If I can show you, because we're on camera. There's a slash mark
Oh,
right
look
over
at that.
there. These are amazing. Now, I bought these for a Freddy Krueger themed Halloween party I threw last year.
Oh,
But they came late, like
no,
a week late.
that's unfortunate.
I didn't get to wear them, and it's not that cold enough yet to wear them again, so they're just on the back burner for now. And I could always put them as like a little shawl scarf thing during this
The cool
recording.
thing, the thing I always liked about Freddy Krueger was, at least from what I know of him,
How's that look?
was that he was kind of he wasn't that scary to me. Um he was more almost a parody of like what a boogeyman was. And I always found that fascinating about him because yes,
So
he did some gruesome things,
you're
but
gonna
go ahead.
you're gonna learn some stuff about Freddy's character, his creation, his persona, like the things that were left sort of like on the cutting room floor. But we should get into first Wes Craven's career and what sort of kicked off him with his, I guess, his what you would say moderate success in the horror genre.
All right.
So I took some notes because I want to get things just right for it's Wes, and also Wes, R.I.P. He did pass
Yes.
away not too long ago, which was, it's I've lost some figures in my life, but usually when like someone of note passes away in the media, like a singer, songwriter, or an actor, I'm not usually phased by it. But Wes was a huge part of my childhood, because of Freddie, and yeah, it hit me more than I thought it would. So Wes's kind of foray into horror began with an amazing film called The Last House on the Left.
I know this. I know this film.
Which fun fact, the house I grew up in is on 23rd Street. I'm sorry, 27th Street and 23rd Avenue. It was originally Elm Street, that
Oh.
block, back when in old Astoria, and it is literally the last house on the left. If you go down, it's a one-way road, and every cab ride home from, be it school or work, when I was back at my mom's house, I would tell the cabbie, "Yeah, I'm on the last house on the left." It's the
Mm.
last house. There's a driveway, and then there's a dry cleaner on that corner. So sort of like Wes's work was embedded in my roots before I was even born, essentially.
Mm.
So Last House on the Left is a film about a family that is in a little cabin in the woods, like how most horror films go.
Obviously, yeah.
And its basis is it's a rape slash revenge story where a young girl is sort of raped and left for dead. She makes her way back to her family, and the family the dad is like super pissed because like his fucking baby girl was savaged by these maniacs,
Mm.
and he sets off in a revenge fueled journey to like take them all and kill them, and it gets very brutal, very bloody, and it spawned, I think, one of the best remakes ever in horror.
So this would count as horror, not because like this is
Yes.
essentially the plot, a
Yes.
little less rapey plot.
Right. I mean,
of
the rape is very brutal
well,
and
yeah.
it's very graphic and it's intense. And then the dad goes on a killing spree, and the family chips in, of course. But it's a thriller and it's a horror film.
Hmm.
But
I
it's
feel
more
like if you're killing the
it's
bad
more
guys, it's not too scary. It's
right,
not like
but it's
a
more based in human drama. But it's a film meant to make you sort of do one of these, as
hmm,
you watch it.
hand over your mouth. Got it
Right,
for our
sort of
audio
thing.
listeners.
Right. Exactly. So bloody, violent, and it had a really awesome remake that came, I think, in the early 2000s. Not too sure what the year was, but that remake is known for a hilarious ending scene where the dad puts the main killer's head in a microwave, and it explodes, which is impossible
Mm,
by all physics. But you gotta let go of reality in a horror movie, and that's what they do best. Just letting
gross.
go of things that are real. So he had that, but his next big horror hit was another film which got an even better remake. See, his films are sort of remake worthy, because they're that iconic for
Okay.
and that was The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh yes, of course, of
Now,
course.
Hills Have Eyes was a film that was deeply entrenched in political messaging, with nuclear testing and nuclear fallout. Um, it was cannibals that were living in the hills and they terrorized the family. And it's a similar beats where they get attacked, some get killed, and then go on revenge.
Hmm.
So similar themes, but the gore, the direction, all those are
Now,
just
are these written
now.
by Wes Craven?
So
Wes
he
Craven?
wrote and directed.
Okay. Okay.
So at this point, Wes is making a name for himself in the horror arena. He had some mild success with both these films, and he's starting to get up there. Like, all right, who is Wes Craven guy? He's just like, who are you? Uh, he went on to do Swamp Thing,
Ah, yeah.
which isn't really horror, but it's more in the sci-fi realm. But again, sci-fi does lean heavily into horror from time. They both kind of have a little Venn diagram situation, and that was an okay movie. Not a huge fan of it, but still,
Hmm.
it was okay. Then, of course, Hills Have Eyes had a sequel, which wasn't as great, but again, most sequels aren't, which we'll learn in when Freddie rolls around. And then,
A lot. That happens a lot with horror guys, man. Horror
yes,
directors, they make their sequels, and it's just like, come on,
and then we take Wes as a super young director, writer in the 70s, early 70s, going into the early to mid 80s when he's desperately, desperately trying to shop this script for a film called A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hmm.
It was turned down by everyone. Everyone. The idea of a killer that could kill you in your dreams, but there's no threat in real life. Like, who's gonna watch that? Like, where's the horror in if you're awake, you're fine? Like, what's the big fucking deal?
Have you ever tried to stay
You
awake for 36 hours?
you just gotta wake up and you're fine. So he shopped it around to no avail, and finally, the powers that be in a small distribution house called New Line Cinema
Ah, yes.
that was led by Bob Shea, who would go on to cameo in a number of Nightmare on Elm Street movies, was were they themselves making a name for distributing schlock, low budget horror films to film houses. So their deal was they would purchase the rights to these really cheesy horror films and sell them to production houses, and they would show them, and they'd make a little bit of money.
Sure.
Because Bob Shea wanted to be a filmmaker when he was younger. It was his dream, and I guess running a production house was getting closer to that dream. He wasn't quite making the films, but just being a part of bringing them to an audience. So he read Wes's script, and he sort of fell in love with it. And as they started to film, Nightmare 1, it became evident that it was going to cost a lot more money than they thought it would.
Dreams, man. Dreams are tough.
Yeah, dreams are tough to the point where Bob Shea had to mortgage the company. So essentially,
That's never a good gamble, Andy.
if Nightmare tanked, it would have bankrupted New Line, and also Wes was paying money out of his own pocket to the staff and the crew to keep it afloat.
We've all been there.
So, just to go back a wee bit for those who don't know who the fuck Freddy Krueger is or what Nightmare on Elm Street is, it is a film about a man named Freddy Krueger who was a child killer and who got off on a technicality because there was a warrant not signed in the right place, and the judge was like, "Well, we can't arrest you or throw you in jail because it's all fucked up." And he goes scot free, and all the pissed off parents of Elm Street kind of gather in secret and decide to track him down to this old boiler room where he took all his kids, and they set on fire and they watched them die.
Hmm.
So,
See, can I tell you how I remember that
right,
movie?
right. Tell
So
me.
I remember I always thought that he was wrongfully convicted of these crimes.
Right,
I always thought that it was like they got the wrong guy and now these people
right.
burned him alive and now his soul is tormented and so now
And
he's going to eat all their
he's
children in their dreams.
retribution. So that was, I believe, a working plot point at some point, but quickly ditched.
Hmm.
And if you can see in the horrible, horrible reboot of Nightmare that came out in 2010, I believe, they sort of took that and played with it. There is a layer of innocence to Freddy in the reboot where you think, were the kids just so young that they mistook his friendliness for some sort of sexual perversion and they made accusations
Mm.
to Freddy? Um, but of course, in the end, he was what they say he was. Now, to touch on that sexual perversion
A
part, there was
monster.
an aspect of Freddy in the original movies that it was to be that he would not only murder kids, he would molest them.
Well,
But at the time of it was being directed and filmed, there was a huge scandal involving a certain Catholic church.
sure. Yeah.
So they were like, you know what? This is toxic. This is like toxic waste. This is radioactive. We're not going to go near this topic. Fuck the pedophilia. It's going to go away. Drop it all together. But if you watch any Nightmare movie, there is a hint of sexual play with Freddy and his victims. It's sort of like it's always underlying. It was never obviously stated like he raped kids, but his mannerisms, his words,
He was always
um,
flamboyant.
not just that, he was very flirty.
Yeah.
A lot of tongue action, a lot of this
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on.
Very uncomfortable.
You know, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. So stuff like that. It was always on that line of a sexual aspect. So, um, they've bet the farm on this movie, and it's costing more and more to shoot by the day, and they're over budget. Now, back then, you know, $4 million for a film is a lot of fucking money.
Sure.
That's huge by today's standards. Um, so they were stretched pretty thin to make this film work, and Wes and Bob knew that if this didn't pan out, a lot of people would be fucking broke and on the streets.
They could get jobs elsewhere.
Right. So the film comes out. It was a Friday night. There were some ads in the papers. It had some really nice marketing. The pitch was it was a fantasy horror film. And
That's an interesting genre to put that
right,
in.
right, or fantasy terror. That's how the commercial pitched it.
A fantasy terror.
Right. Because it wasn't your typical. Like at that time, we already had Chainsaw Massacre. We had Halloween at that point. We hadn't gotten Jason yet. I don't believe Jason was a thing. By the time Freddie rolled around. Maybe it was. I forget the exact years on that. But we've had enough typical slasher films where the idea of someone killing you in your dreams and you die in real life was a very new and wild idea. It lent itself to creative sets and really weird imagery. Like the opening scene is a sheep running around in the protagonist's. Well, you think she's a protagonist in her nightmare. Um, so things were able to get weird with this whole dreamscape scenario. So film comes out. It's a Friday night, and Bob Shea is sort of like making the rounds to local theaters to see what the air is like, what's the atmosphere, and he sees that there's lines around the corner for this movie, and at that point, they realize that the fuse has been lit. This is going to be a mega hit.
Now I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
What do you think was the reason that that before the movie even came out, it resonated with?
Very strong early previews. Um, and there wasn't a lot for it to go against at the time it came out.
Okay.
And this is also a culture where going to a theater on a Friday night for a date or with your friends was the norm. Like today, we play Apex Legends or play our video games
Right.
or do a
Now,
podcast.
all right. So I have a little bit of a couple of little bits of trivia for you.
Sure.
Do you know what um so Nightmare on Elm Street, right? That
Mhm.
was in 84.
Yes.
Okay. So it was 85 when the second one came out, because horror happens like that. They just bang them out like crazy.
Mhm.
Once you got a popular one, you go crazy.
Right.
Do you know what the movie after A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge was?
In the franchise?
No. The movie that New Line Cinema, I'm sorry, I should have said New Line Cinema, the movie that they put out right after
Oh
Nightmare
no,
2.
I don't know.
It was Critters.
Ah,
Now,
that's another favorite of mine.
the reason Critters is important
Mhm.
is because that is what Raphael was seeing in New Line Cinema's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
One might say that without A Nightmare on Elm Street, without Wes Craven, we would
Mhm.
not have the Ninja Turtles 1990 movie. And
Right,
without the
because
Ninja Turtles 1990 movie,
Mhm.
you could make the case that we would not have the Lord of the Rings franchise, which also was done by New Line Cinema. You
Here's the
see how they
thing.
grew?
Here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing. There's a reason why New Line, back in the day, before they were bought by Time Warner Cable, some years back, they were known as the house that Freddy built.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Freddy Krueger put them on the map. It made them so much money, millions of dollars they made off the first film. Now, Wes, if you look at his body of work, he's not one for sequels. Hills Have Eyes, yes, got a sequel. But again, that's also early in his career. And, he's trying to find work. He finds
Right.
success in the first movie, get a shot at a second movie, directs, writes, it's his own vision. But for the most part, he envisioned Nightmare as a standalone entry.
Sure.
But Bob, being Bob, he wanted some sort of hook at the end of the movie. He wanted there to be a cliffhanger to sort of hint that maybe Freddy isn't dead. Because those who all know who've seen the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, Freddy dies by Nancy saying, "I don't believe in you," or "I take all my power away from you." She stops being afraid, essentially, and he sort of fades out. of existence, and that's how he dies.
Because yeah, okay,
Because Freddy feeds off of fear.
right.
He's sort of like it in that way. And I think it in Stephen King's book was based a lot on Freddy Krueger's character, just living off of fear. Um, oh, Freddy, just so you know, his conception came from when Wes was a little boy, and one night he looked out the window and saw a man with a trench coat and a fedora hat who was just standing looking up at him from his window.
Creepy.
So he sort of, when their eyes met, a young Wes, ducked down to where the guy couldn't see him. He waited 5 minutes and he checked and he was still there staring at him. And then he also did a gesture like that with his face to rattle Wes. And just the idea of this grown man that was deliberately trying to scare this small boy is like the idea of where Freddy came from, as the look of him and his demeanor. Now, as for the whole dream death thing, that was actually in the news. In the Philippines, there was a couple cases where kids were dying in their sleep. And there was one case of a young boy who was afraid to sleep because he knew he would die. And his parents, were like, "No, you're fine, go to bed." They gave him some pills. He went off to sleep. And sure enough, he died in his sleep. After first giving off a blood curdling scream. And then after that, they found pots of coffee, like in his room, hiding in corners to keep himself awake at night. So
What was
that,
killing the Filipino children?
fucking, I don't know.
Was it
Um,
Freddie?
um, what's a
I would. I mean,
adobo? What's a like a Filipino spice? Or
I don't know. I don't know.
halo halo. Eating too much Jollibee. That's what's killing the Filipinos. All right, so back to Bob Shea wanting a sequel to Nightmare. This was a huge point of contention because Wes was like, "Nope, he's fucking dead. We can't do any more with this character. Like, I want him to be a one-time thing, and that's it." So multiple endings were filmed in the first Freddy, but the one that I think most remember is the kids getting in the car, and oh yeah, all the kids that were dead are now alive again. Surprise, surprise.
Why?
Happy ending. Because it was all a dream. Or is it a dream? Or is she in a dream right now? If you watch the first film, it kind of plays on what's real and what's not. Like, was the film a dream? Was Nancy, the lead character, dreaming at the end? It gets weird with what's what. And it works if it's just a single film. It remains ambiguous. But when you do sequels, then
Now you have to explain
it
shit.
drops all the mystery because okay, well, clearly it goes on, so you know what's real in this fucking previous film.
I mean, the only way that you could really get away with that is if you did completely new cast every time.
Well, we'll get to that in part two, but that's not even a Wes Craven film though. So you will likely recall the kids go in the car, it's like a convertible, the hood pops down, and it's Freddy colors on the hood of the fucking convertible. And Nancy is like, "Shit, like this isn't right. What's going on?" She's trying to get out of the car, then the car drives off on its own. And then Nancy's mom, who's waving to her as they're driving away, um, Freddie breaks through the front door window and pulls her through. And that's how it ends. As the girls are doing the jump rope song. 1, 2, Freddie's coming for you.
Right.
So great ending. Bob got his hook. Him and Wes sort of like were like, "Come on, We're friends. We're in this together. Let's not fight. I'll acquiesce. Here's your fucking hook. Um, so it makes a lot of money. And New Line thought that, well, do we need Wes to write this? Because what also happened in the deal when New Line took on this project, they retained all the rights to the character.
That's how they get you.
So Wes, in desperation, trying to sell his script after rejection upon rejection, was like, you know what? If you make this film happen, yes, you can retain all the rights because it's going to be a great partnership.
Do whatever the hell you want with them.
So yeah, so Bob and Newland were like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, it's a guy who kills you in your dreams. We'll kind of like mirror the first movie in the second, and we should be fine.
Yeah, just make really cool death
They
sequences.
they
The plot
were
doesn't
so
matter.
lost without Wes. They even thought of recasting Robert Englund's character, Freddy Krueger. They're like, well, he's a guy in makeup. You don't even see his face half the time. So
Rookie mistake.
do we even need fucking Robert as Freddy?
You don't even see
The
Robin Williams as the genie.
dude, the test screening, like the test footage of the dude that was playing Freddy before they had to rehire Robert for more money.
Well, obviously.
Because Robert at that time had some success in a TV series called V. And then when he really sold Freddy's character, his worth blew up. So he knew he could ask for more money from New Line. So like, fuck you and your more money. We'll just fucking get some a tall guy that has no acting ability and can just walk around like a fucking statue. And it was a Frankenstein essentially. That's what it looked like. There was no the slickness and the walk. If you hear Robert explain how he goes into playing Freddy's character, it's two things. One, it's the frustration of putting on the makeup gets him in that Freddy mode. Because it was hours upon hours of applying the prosthetic makeup to him, the burn look, as it were. And he had in his mind of the old like James Cagney Western films, like having a gun on your side holstered, because the glove was very heavy for Robert. So his approach was like, all right, so it's like a gun that I'm reaching for. Like I'm slung over. And he used that in Freddy's walk. So recasting him doesn't do much if you take all the heart and soul behind who Freddy is.
Right. It'll
So,
be a cheap imitation.
right. So they bring back on Robert, they pay him more money, they make a sequel, and the franchise is born. And Wes is nowhere in all this. Wes is doing a movie. Whew, a movie which you have likely seen.
Oh.
It is a film. This is his film right after Nightmare, after his sort
Oh
of
boy.
falling out with New Line because, again, he didn't want a franchise. New Line did. It was a whole big stink. He made a film about a teenager who was a robot scientist genius
Okay.
who was working on an AI
Oh.
and had created an artificial intelligence with this robot called Beep Beep. And his best friend, who was a girl, dies because her father chucks her down a flight of stairs. And he decides at her funeral or after the funeral to dig her up and implant Beep Beep's AI chip in her brain to bring her back to life. And this film is called Deadly Friend.
No, I have not seen this.
It was shown very often on Channel 11 back in the day.
Mm.
Um, Now apparently when you insert a AI chip into a human being, it displays murderous tendencies.
Right, obviously. Yeah.
So the AI goes haywire, and his friend, who has been brought back to life, goes on a killing spree. First killing her dad.
Obvious. Yeah, that's a pretty obvious
Then,
mark.
in the most amazing piece of cinema footage in history of all films, she kills the grumpy neighbor lady by taking a basketball and exploding her head with it.
Oh.
And you have to watch this clip. She throws her against the wall. She grabs a basketball and hurls it at her face, and it explodes like scanner style.
Whoa.
And again, back in those days, it's all practical effects. So you can see where the quick cut is made for the fake melon face that explodes for the for the shot.
Well, I'll look on YouTube right now for this scene while you continue
Right.
your story.
So you got to watch it. It's like a Deadly Friend basketball. It'll come right up. So that film comes out and it fucking bombs. It's cheesy as hell. It's not super scary, super low budget. And at this point, you can tell that
Oh,
Wes, you've seen this movie.
wait
You
a
must
minute.
have seen this movie.
This is the old lady.
Yes.
Is that
It
not the mom from the
yes.
Goonies?
Yes, it is.
Or the okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
Yes, it is. And I think it's also the mom
The
from
the mom thief, the whatever.
right. She's like a she's a that lady actress. She's been the old grumpy lady in many many
Crotchety
films.
old lady, yeah.
I think she was also in Don't Throw Off from the Train with Billy Crystal and Danny DeVito. I think she was the mom in that.
Oh
But
my god,
anyway,
this robot is hilarious.
right. Oh, and the film ends with the best friend with the chip in her brain. Her her insides become robotic completely.
Oh dear god. Oh, and then there's just the body flopping around.
Right. Her internal organs are all replaced with machines. She was full on robot by the time the movie's over. So apparently the chip also replaces her insides with robotics. It's so bad. Such a
I'm
bad.
watching this right now. This is awful.
But it's so good it's bad though. But Wes is better than this.
And there's a basketball crawling under this man's
Yep.
sheets.
Yep. So that was 86 for Wes. Deadly
What is
Friend came out.
happening?
So let's go back a bit to Nightmare 2,
Okay.
which was made without Wes's involvement. Didn't write
Wes
a script.
Craven.
Didn't write a script. Didn't direct. Didn't produce. Had no part in it whatsoever. The film was released with financial success because it's going off of the first movie.
All right. That always happens.
And you can't tell from the marketing and commercials that it's going to be a bad movie or just bereft of gay subtexts. So much of it. Oh God. It's just they call it the Nightmare on Gay Street in some circles. So it comes out and it's fucking bombs because the plot of part 2 was they've taken out the nightmare dream death scenario, and instead it's a possession film where a new family moves into Nancy's house from the first film because her family's all dead, and she's in a fucking psych ward for going crazy because the dream man killed her. New family moves in with our new Scream Queen lead, Jessie, the first ever male Scream Queen.
I know this one. Yes.
And this story is about Freddie possessing his body, becoming an avatar for Freddie in the real world to kill on his behalf, essentially. And there's so much gayness in this movie. There's a leather S&M bar, which you see the first of Bob Shaye's cameos as a bartender in a leather harness serving drinks to Jesse in this leather bar. Um, there's lines in the film like, you have a girl waiting for you and she's horny, but you want to stay in my bedroom with me. That's Jesse's male best friend to him. There's a scene
How
where
subtle are they?
there's this, no, it's very overt. There's a scene in the locker room where Jesse, as Freddie, kills his abusive coach, who is also at the leather bar.
Mm.
Um,
Getting use of those actors, I
where
guess.
he's in the shower, strung up by jump rope to the shower heads, and with a bunch of towels, gets like rat-tailed in the ass until he's red and sore, and a lot of ass cheek close-ups as it gets redder and redder and gayer and gayer. And there's also the fact that when Jesse is intimate with his female lead co-star, Freddie comes out and he can't fuck her. And it helps that the director was gay, the lead actor Jesse was gay, the set designer was gay. There is a game in his room called Probe. There's a sign on his door that says no girls allowed. It's just, there's a dance sequence when he puts on these like star glasses, and it just reeks of gayness.
So somebody making that movie, or several people making that movie, were exploring something.
Now, right, they thought like, let's our take be like it's a really psychosexual coming out story. But no one at New Line who was paying for this movie had any idea that this was going on, to the point where that they were all like incredibly dumb or they were just super latent in their own homosexuality.
Now,
So
is this movie still lambasted in the Freddie fandom?
listen. It has what it has going for it is, I love it personally. Not because I'm gay, because it is not the worst in the entire franchise. That's for way, way down the line. We have some way worse ones. This has, believe it or not, a very dark take on Freddie. He has some really great lines here. There's a scene where he's at a pool party and he looks at the entire crowd of kids and says, "You're all my children now." It's a great line. He's like, "You're all my future victims. You're my kids. You're Freddie's kids." The makeup and the effects, not so great. But it has some great moments in the movie. If you can get past the gayness of it all, it's a competent horror film. It's not the worst sequel ever imaginable.
Okay, but Wes Craven had nothing to do with this.
Right. But New Line knew that, well, this is getting sort of meandering to negative reviews, and this is a franchise now, so we need Wes back. So it's, I think, a year later, they go with Wes's second nightmare film. Like, all right, Wes, come on board, give us a script, and you're on board. So Wes, who had a lot of baggage from Nightmare 1, wrote a script that was very meta and very weird, and it was extremely, extremely unshootable.
Oh, good. That's a very bold plan there, Mr.
Right.
Craven.
It was, the budget for his vision would have been, for the late 80s, astronomical. Now, we're going to point to a key word here, meta.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Wes would later use the basis for his version of Nightmare 3 for the 7th film in the Nightmare franchise, when he came back in full form. That was the New Nightmare.
I remember that one, yeah.
That's for later. So he writes a script. It's sort of we can't pay for this. It's too fantastical. So they bring on Frank Darabont, who had worked on the Blob remake, which is an amazing fucking movie, and to sort of rewrite Wes's vision and bring it more down to earth and to essentially make it cheaper to shoot. And the result was when you take just a little bit of Wes's ideas, it was like saying he was the George Lucas. It was all insanity. It had to be grounded by somebody. It's like when you let Kojima off the leash with no oversight. So Frank sort of brought it down to a realistic script, and you have the Nightmare 3, The Dream Warriors,
Yep.
which Wes has a writing credit on. Um, he was also an executive producer on the film, but that I think was more of a gimme. Like, well, let's slap his name on this, so it sort of lends to a more authenticity. And yeah, what's his back?
I mean,
It's a proper
well,
sequel.
did his weight still carry? I mean,
Listen,
did his
listen.
name still carry weight? I mean, he only had
Right.
Nightmare and then really nothing
But
else.
for Nightmare fans who were all up on the first movie's dick,
Right.
Wes's name being in the mix got them all like fucking boners rock hard again. So for those people, it meant something. And with that word of mouth, you could bring back this very close to dead franchise. Because again, it made tons of money, way more than the first movie. But if you're going to do a sequel, who's going to go watch it if the second one tanked like critically? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So Wes came back in the fold. Now it's like, great. This is not a total loss for us. Like, we made our money. We can make even more money now with this third movie. What's his name is on the fucking credits. And you have what I think is, to most fans, the best film in the entire Nightmare franchise.
Mm.
Um, the essential plot is it's the last of the Elm Street children, and that is a phrase reserved for the kids of the parents that killed Freddie. So in the first film, you had 4 kids, and all their parents were involved in Freddie's death. And he would only invade their dreams. That's like the connection between Freddie and his victims in the Nightmare films. And then the third movie, you have the last of those kids who are still around or too young to recall who Freddie was, or just at that time babies, because Nancy from part one is a little bit older at this point and has become a dream psychologist or a therapist
Yeah.
or a
Yeah. Yeah.
specialist or
Yeah.
some made up fucking lesbian dance theory major she did. I don't know. It's not real. That's not a real job. But anyway, she was making waves in dream therapy. So there are these kids, these young kids who are all being committed for suicide. And they all share this common bond of this boogeyman in their dreams with the red and green sweater and the burned up face and the claw hands. So Nancy sort of says, "Hey guys, this is not a delusion. He's very real because I've met him before." And we're introduced to the ability to pull people into your dream. So one character, Kristen, who is played by the ever adorable Patricia Arquette, who was so bad, did not
Yeah.
recall a single line on set. Even her own character's name couldn't get right.
I've heard of this. Yes.
There's a scene where a little girl asks her what her name is, and she says Kirsten, as in, is it Kristen or Kirsten? I'm not quite sure. I'm gonna meet halfway and say something. And I bet they were like, all right, cut. That's as close as you're gonna get. You've been saying Judy all day and Rebecca. We'll go with that one.
Well, she got better over the
She did.
years
She
in her
did.
career.
This also introduces to the world Larry Fishburne
Mhm.
in the credits as Larry fucking Fishburne, and that's Lawrence Fishburne, of course. Oh, just to go back a bit, we had in the first movie in the opening credits and introducing Johnny Depp.
Mhm.
Now, for any horror fan out there, you know that most actors and actresses first star in horror films. Jennifer Aniston, DiCaprio, um, Depp, McConaughey, um, Lawrence Fishburne, a lot of the
Um,
heavy hitters. It's like the soap opera of a movie. It's cheap work, it's easy to get cast in, and it's a way to get your feet wet in the acting realm. And if you're halfway decent back then, you could find yourself in a horror film.
and beautiful. Don't forget that.
Yes, and beautiful. Um, oh, as a side note, there's a little side trivia. McConaughey's first film was Chainsaw Massacre 4, a film so bad that it was shelved because of McConaughey. He had gotten so it was basically being reshot and edited for a long time, and during that little like period, McConaughey got some success in other films, and he was like, "Fucking bury that movie, don't release it." And they were like, "Oh, you're famous now. We're gonna release it, bitch," and they did.
All right, all right, all right.
All right. So, Nightmare 3 is important for one key thing. It is the shedding of creepy, horrifying, fear-induced Freddie being replaced with the jokester, the one-liner Freddie, and that comes from a line ad-libbed by Robert himself. It's a scene. It's a girl watching TV, trying to stay awake, and she wanted to be an actress. She's watching The Late Show, and she has little cigarettes, and she's burning her wrist, her forearm to stay awake in the night. That was her way of coping with it. And she dozes off, and the TV goes static, and she goes up, and Freddy's arms pop out from the sides, little mechanical, like Skynet Terminator arms, and his head pops up from the top of the TV.
I
He's
remember
got he's got
this.
little rabbit he's got little rabbit ears, doing that little antenna rabbit ears, and he's like, "This is it, Jennifer, your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch." And that is the moment. It is the moment. Freddie is just the jokester. He's about quips and being funny and one-liners because of that one moment. So that film gets released, and it's fucking huge. We get a video game on the NES. We get soundtracks. We got, Freddie Rap. We got Freddie's Hotline, which I'm sure you recall that from the TV days, the commercial. To dial Freddie and hear him
No.
talk to you over the phone. You can actually listen to all of those on YouTube. If you search for Freddie's hotline, he would tell you a story, and they're pretty good. I actually did one back in the day. My mom fucking flipped. She was like, $10. Thought it was a sex line.
No, Mom. You don't have to worry about that with
Yeah,
me.
don't worry.
I want to
No,
talk to Freddie.
I was at the Freddie, Mom. I want to talk to an old guy because I got daddy issues.
1, 2, buckle my shoe. All right. So Wes, he obviously his name's attached to this. I'm sure the
Right.
producer credit helps him out a bit.
Great, huge success. But again, he wasn't involved in it. So New Line now has a means to, or a reason to push on without Wes indefinitely. They can now afford they can afford to pay for Robert for future films, which they did. And they just had to find the right script because they had the means to make more Freddy's. So Wes goes on and he does what he did last time. He makes a couple of stinkers. He makes a film called The Serpent and the Rainbow with Bill Pullman,
Mm.
which is not that great. It involves like tribes and curses and vampirism and other things. It's weird, horrible movie, not good. He does The Shocker,
Oh
a
boy.
film about an inmate who gets shocked and becomes fucking Electro.
So, which is also the plot of Ernest Goes to Jail.
Yes, it is. So it's a dark version of Ernest Goes to Jail. So there's that fucking treasure of a film. Um, Now he did do a film called The People Under the Stairs, which is not based on Harry Potter.
Yeah, I don't know that one either.
It's again, it's Wes what Wes does best. Horror. Not a great movie. I think I've only seen it once in my life. I barely recall that plot. So I'm not gonna go on that for too long. But we are now in the early 90s. Freddie was sort of killed at this point. I believe it was in 1991 or two, or even 1990 for that matter. Freddie had seen 5 movies. We had 2 more post Dream Warriors. It was The Dream Master, which is my personal favorite. When I was in Texas last year, I went to a horror convention and I got a poster, the actual poster that I had from a kid from the theater of Dream Master, signed by every cast member, including Robert, which is in my living room as we speak. It's one of my prized possessions. I'll be one day buried with it. I guarantee you that. So Nightmare 3 comes out, and then they have a release date for part 4, which is less than a year after 3. That's how fast the turnaround was. Because they made so much money and they wanted to fast track a sequel. They set a date for less than a year later with no script, no cast, no nothing.
Always a good
So
idea.
what happens to this film? It gets bungled because of the writer strike at the time.
Mm, couldn't
Now,
see that happening.
New Line also brought in a homeless man, to direct this movie.
Interesting.
Let me expand on that. Rennie Harlan, who was known for True Crimes and other explodey action films, was at that point desperate for work, could barely speak English, and he loved Freddie. He essentially camped out at New Line's doorstep every day, begging for the job to make the next Freddie movie. And because of the strike and everything else, they're like, fine, just fucking take it, hobo, and make a movie. So you'll see in this film, the script is very dumb. The lines are equally dumb. It leads into the ending of part 3. Freddy is kind of dead in that film ish. They use holy water on him, and they bury his bones, and that does things apparently. Release his mortal coil and put his soul to peace. That's why he's haunting the dream world. Makes sense, but then that all gets tossed out for later films. Either way. So the last remaining Elm Street kids in part 3, and that's Kristen, Kincaid, and Joey, are all killed within minutes of the 4th film. Tragic. We've loved these characters for a whole movie. They've survived Freddy, and they're just tossed out like fucking yesterday's jam. Like they're nothing, they're trash, disposed of. And a new thing happens where Kristen gives her dream ability of letting her friends go in her dreams with her to fight Freddie, goes to a mousy girl named Alice. Now, what that does is Freddie now has new kids to target because once the three Elm Street kids were killed, that's like kind of it for him. These are my kids. They're all dead now. My work is done. But since this bitch passed her power on to this new bitch, then I can use this new bitch to haunt other kids in their dreams. And that's part four's basis. This new mousy girl and the new ragtag team of friends all get killed by Freddy. And it's all very cheesy and it's all very corny. And but it has some great effects though. Like there's the girl that was in Just the 10 of Us was a weightlifter and she becomes a roach. Her arms rip off, which is lifting weights, becomes a giant cockroach. That's kind of a fun scene. But there's that film, and then there's this part five. There's the Dream Child, which, if you can imagine, it's about a baby that dreams, and Freddy using the kid's dreams to invade Alice's dreams and get to her friends through the baby.
Also had nothing to do with Wes.
Nope.
Okay.
And then that leads to, I'm sorry, there were three films. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. It's like, all right, guys, you've sort of milked Freddy at this point.
Move
It's
on.
sort of a diminishing returns. Part
Right.
four had the most in the box office because of part three's success, but part five fucking tanked. Tanked. At this point, each film made more than the last at the box office.
Right.
But five was just a dumpster fire. And you could tell really bad effects. Passable script. It had some weird like teen mom issues, which was kind of cool for back in the day to tackle that sort of a dilemma for a pregnant teen. But aside from that, it was horrible. Um, the plot involved like finding Freddy's mom's remains. It was just a shit show from the get go. And
I mean,
then
it cost $8 million and its box office was 22 million.
yeah, I mean, still that's what it wasn't.
Yikes!
That wasn't good for them.
Yikes!
So at this point, New Line says we've milked this cow. We're not going to get like a $40 million return like the olden days. It's diminishing returns. Let's do a send off. If we kill Freddy, if we market this as Freddy's death, then we'll get butts in the seats. But that only works when you don't spend all your budget on fucking 3D.
Yeah,
And it
buddy.
was all 3D back in the day. So you have 3D bullshit with a half-assed origin story for Freddy. He was an abused kid, yada yada. Then you have Freddy's daughter being a thing that no one knew about, and she's the main character. It's totally not involved with any other previous films, character, setting, otherwise. And it was bad. And it was a sad send off for Freddy. So Freddy's dead, killed, finished. Then in the mid 90s, 94,
1994. Yeah.
New Line says, you know what? Let's bring Freddy back. Let's bring this character back because this could be good again. And let's bring back Wes. So Wes signs on one condition. He wants complete creative control of the project. And New Line at that point wasn't doing so well with its movies. Again, the house that Freddy built with no Freddy.
Yeah, they already shit on Ninja Turtles
Yeah,
by this point.
exactly. So they concede. years of bad blood between them, royalty issues with the whole Freddy franchise. It's all a wash under the bridge. Let's bring back Wes for like what he called the definitive nightmare movie. Now, this was, in many ways, the prototype for the Scream franchise. And that is a very meta, self-referential film.
Now, correct my memory. Is
Mhm.
this the one where like Freddy is a pop culture thing in
Yep,
this
and
universe,
you
and
are
then like
exactly correct, my
okay, yeah, yeah,
friend.
yeah, yeah.
So, in talks with Heather Langenkamp, the girl that played Nancy Thompson in the first and third movies, she had some sort of insane, crazy stalker fandom, which Wes leveraged in his script for this movie. And the synopsis was that Nancy, or Heather, in the real world is a struggling actress just living in a post Freddy universe, just always being Nancy to everyone. And Wes Craven and New Line approach her at a potential Freddy reboot. And she's a little bit concerned. She has a son now. She's sort of past Freddy. She's trying to, act in more serious films, which she was. But, it's hard to get work when you're just fucking Nancy to most people.
Right,
You're typecast.
right.
And
Just like you,
her,
you're
right,
Nancy.
exactly. I am a Nancy boy.
Yeah.
And her in-film husband is like a special effects wizard, and he was working with New Line behind her back, planning the new Freddy film. Now, during this whole situation, she's getting phone calls from her stalker, and she's having terrible nightmares about Freddy. And it seems that Freddy, the character Freddy, is able to come into our world because a long time ago, an ancient evil existed. And to trap this evil, it would get lost in the story. So for years, this evil has lived in the Freddy films as Freddy. And when you kill the franchise and you kill the character, the evil is set free.
Uh, uh.
And that, yeah, wait, do you have a nosebleed yet? I can't
It's
tell.
coming.
I'm sure it is. And this evil has liked the Freddy form so much that he takes on that form in the real world, to the point that he blends reality with the nightmare films. John Saxon, who played Nancy's dad in the first movie, is in the film, and he reprises his role at the end. And Heather must become Nancy to face Freddy.
It's very so. I mean, it's kind of brilliant, but
Right,
I probably would have gone away from the ancient evil thing, and
right,
I would have
right,
went with the it's a person who thinks that they're Freddy Krueger because they're so in love with the character of Freddy Krueger, and like
right. But then you can't
he goes
have.
on a murderous thing, but he won't stop
Yes, yes, yes,
stalking her
yes.
unless he gets to be killed by Nancy. Like that's
Right,
his
right,
fetish is to be
right.
killed by Nancy.
But you can't have fantastical sets and imagery with a guy who's just a Freddy fanboy
Right.
who's cosplaying fucking Freddy.
Unless he was also a millionaire.
Sure.
Just saying. Batman's a
Right.
little psychotic and he could have fantastic set pieces.
Right. It's also fun seeing what's his face? Robert playing Robert in a film. And he's being haunted by Freddy dreams too. And he like fucking gets out of town when they get too intense for him. And it's a good film. It's different. But it kind of reminds us why New Line shied away from Wes's Nightmare 3 script. because it was a lot like this movie,
Mm-hmm.
very meta and weird. But it
But
found an
so was
audience.
Nightmare. So was
Right,
the
right.
first
But
film.
could
That
you
was
imagine
weird.
being too weird for Nightmare?
Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, that film comes out. It has some success. It's a Nightmare movie, but not quite. And we won't see Freddy again for like 2 decades, I think, until we saw Freddy vs. Jason.
Which was a sequel to 6 and not New Nightmare.
So Freddy vs. Jason was a long teased uh, collab between New Line and Paramount for a Freddy Jason crossover. But there were so many rights issues, and it was like a 10-year development
Yeah,
cycle.
yeah,
They even teased at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, Freddy's claw
I
grabbing
remember that.
Jason's mask and pulling it into hell.
Hmm.
Oh, which by the way, since Freddy, I forget which came first. I think because Freddy had a weird family daughter backstory, then they gave Jason his own weird dad family with a half sister niece thing in the final Nightmare, the final Friday. So weird shit with how those two franchises had their final installments.
Mm.
So Nightmare's done for a while, and Wes is moving on to he's moving on to a movie which was the last in a 3-picture deal that Eddie Murphy had with, I believe, Columbia or Universal, and that is Vampire in Brooklyn.
Oh, what a good movie! I remember this one.
I've seen it maybe twice in my life. I recall one line. I think when Eddie gets shot, and he's like, "Oh, it kind of itches a little bit. It itches just a little bit," and that's it. And it's like it's so bad. It's not even good bad, just bad. And he's clearly phoning it in. And at that point, it's selling Eddie's iconic actor status to make bucks at the theater at the box
Well, right
office.
after that came Shrek. So
Right. Well, it's still better than fucking Vampire in Brooklyn. That was just stinky old stink bomb. But after that, we have what can be said, arguably, as the next high point in Wes's career, and that's Scream.
yeah, buddy.
So we have Nightmare. That's like his bread and butter. That's his name. At this point, Wes is known as, largely in part for Nightmare, as a master of horror, along the greats like John Carpenter, Toby Hopper, all of them.
Stephen
So
King.
Stephen King, yeah, more in the film will be Stephen King. So, or David Cronenberg, these people. So Scream is sort of Wes's take on a meta slasher film. You can see bits of it in New Nightmare, but he goes full on with it with Scream.
Scream was so cool because it felt like it was way grounded in a reality.
Because it
Like,
was.
yeah, like that always felt like, oh, this could happen. Like,
It really could.
somebody could just come into my house with this stupid costume on and murder me.
So aside from having this fresh cast of hot actors, you got your Nev Campbell, you got your Skeet Ulrich, you got your Drew Barrymore,
You got your Courtney Cox,
Courtney Cox, David Arquette.
Dewey
Arquette,
Cox.
the Arquettes are all about the Wes Craven films. Apparently, can't escape them. Great cast, and Courtney Cox, in Friends fame was high at that time when this film
Mhm.
came out. So she's,
Ace Ventura. Don't forget Ace Ventura.
yeah, of course. But for most people, it was because of Friends. So she's like box office bucks, like no doubt. So perfect cast, and you have the perfect script. It is a slasher film, and it's also a murder mystery. It's a whodunit.
And it's also kind of a comedy.
It is.
It's
It
almost a parody of the slasher films.
it sort of plays off of slasher tropes,
Right.
like when the character says "Who's there?" when there's a strange sound, that means you're gonna die, and then that happens later in the film. Who's there? And they fucking die. Uh, all of it is there. And you have like your blockbuster video obsessed horror fan that knows all about film to lead the way. Your nerd character. You have all the archetypes are in there. And it's gory. It's what Wes does best. Gore and horror. It is peak Wes. And him and what's his nuts? Kevin Williamson just wrote a banger script. Now, this you wouldn't think had franchise potential. But when it was as successful as this was, the writing was on the wall.
Hello, Sydney.
Do you like scary movies?
What's your
What's your favorite scary movie? Who was the killer in Friday the 13th? Jason. Wrong. It was Jason's mom. Trick question. I'm going to die now.
Which is ironic
Right.
because Scream 3? 2? 2.
4?
Which one was the mom?
That was 2.
2.
2 was the mom.
Yeah.
2 was
It's
the
irony.
mom of the son from the first film.
Right.
Although, so oddly enough, a fun fact: there is a character in part 1. Oh, the Fonz! The Fonz in part 1. Fonzarelli.
So good. So good.
There's a-
I actually really liked the Scream movies. I thought they were really well done.
There's
Even when they started to get a little ridiculous, they were still fun.
There's a janitor in the first film with a red and green sweater named Freddie in the first movie.
Sure.
Just so you know.
Sure.
So we have fucking another franchise on our hands. We got Scream 1, we got Scream 2, and Scream 3. All within like 4 years for Wes. He's got some weird shit in between called Music of the Heart, which I haven't fucking watched. I don't know what the fuck that is. But it's on my list here, so I'm going to mention it. But between the late 90s and 2000, it was all Scream for Wes. And he did 3 of them. And that was it for Wes Craven. That was like his sort of ending legacy of his career. But Wes being Wes, he still made more films that weren't as successful or got him as much fame, but still decent films. He did a film called Red Eye, which
Oh, I remember that one.
stars what's his face that played Scarecrow in Batman Begin.
Yeah.
That dude with the weird name.
Uh-huh.
It's like a flight. They're on a flight. He's a killer on the flight. That's
Yeah.
that
No, I
movie.
remember that one. Yeah.
He did Pulse, which I think was to cap on the J horror craze that The Ring kicked off back in the 2000s. He did The Hills Have Eyes 2 remake, which wasn't that good. Was not that great. And then he did Scream 4. That's his final film, which he was a co-writer for, but he wasn't credited for that. His final movie. Now, along the way, Wes produced some films that weren't that great. He wrote a few books as well. Did some TV. But Wes, like The Twilight Zone or shit like that. Nightmare Cafe. Things that most folks don't even recall these days. But for the most part, who Wes Craven is Freddie and Scream.
So, all right, Q&A time.
Let's do it.
Why do you think his title of the Master of Horror is deserved when he really was only responsible for 2 Freddy movies that were really any good and like 1 Scream movie,
2.5
whatever.
Freddy movies,
2.5 Freddy movies. Like I feel like that would be like calling I don't know, like like a one-hit wonder musician, the master of pop, if just because they came out with like a really good pop song.
Right.
But like they're not Michael Jackson. You
Right.
know, they're not they didn't come out with banger after banger after banger.
Right.
I feel like what he could be, like what I would consider him as, is maybe the innovator of modern horror, like something like that.
Sure.
Because like up to that point, like through the 60s and 70s, you're really looking at Alfred Hitchcock as like the true master of horror at that point. Like,
No, no, sure. I totally agree with you on that. But you have to remember one thing, though. Um, Wes created a horror icon in Freddy Krueger, much like Carpenter created um, Michael Myers or Sean Cunningham in Jason Voorhees. They made these characters,
so
and
it's more like they're the
it's
fathers. They're like
just
the founding
father, yeah,
fathers.
and just to see what Freddy had did to pop culture when he first came out, and in the later years, it was Freddy fucking mania, dude. And Wes, for all his bad film, was still a very decent director. He understood what horror was. Like, yes, the films now are like laced with cheese. um, but he knew what horror movies were all about, what made them work to some extent for his lesser films.
What I
But
will say
right. Mhm.
about it is like the mascot horror film, the mascot horror
Yeah.
genre, kind of died with his characters
Hmm.
until like the Ghostface
Yeah.
kill. I
From
think his name is
Scream. Yeah.
Ghostface.
Yeah.
Like that became an icon, right?
Yeah.
Halloween costume for
Hmm.
decades at this point.
It was one of mine for 1 year when I was a kid.
Yeah, mine too.
Hmm.
Did you have that shitty one with the blood in the mask?
Yes, you pump it out, the
Yeah, that was so
plastic on top.
stupid.
Oh my
That was so
god, yeah.
stupid. I had the glow in the dark one. That was cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then like a fake butcher knife. But they like I think that's what makes the mark because The Hills Have Eyes or you know ensemble horror films, like when you look at Saw, for example.
Yeah.
Saw has like the jigsaw little puppet thing, but he's not
Mhm.
the iconic killer.
No.
Chucky was an iconic killer, but Chucky also suffered the when you're a horror icon long enough, you become a parody of yourself, which is kind of
Right.
like what happened with Freddie a little bit towards the end as well.
Right. Which is why New Nightmare brought him into more dark,
Right,
less jokey territory. Like
right. But he
let's get him
became a
all his
joke again
bullshit.
with Jason versus Freddie.
Just enough though.
Right,
He's actually not that bad in that film. It's like I think that's one of Robert's best portrayals of the Freddy character. It's just jokey enough. He's embracing that he can own the dream world, but it's not one line heavy. Like the
right,
lines are very well crafted for him in that movie.
right.
But yeah, to your point, I feel like in by today's standards, if I wouldn't label him as a master of horror for his films, but when you give birth to a Freddy character and plus working on so much horror for your entire career, that's all he's ever known is just horror. That's why the name kind of fits for him.
Mm, mm. Yeah, when I think when you could put up what he created for the horror genre.
Yeah.
Scream doesn't get enough credit. I will say that. Scream is a very important movie for a very specific group of kids, like the
Yeah.
millennials, the early millennials. Like
Yeah.
I was
Listen,
10,
listen.
I think, when that
Yeah.
movie came out.
Listen, dude, by the time the 90s rolled around, all the slasher fans who were growing up at that point, I mean, I was in my early teens when that film came out. I think 13 or 12 or around there. Um, if you were 10, I was like a 13. Um, and nothing could scare us anymore. And the kids of that generation weren't into horror films.
Right.
But when you put a bunch of sexy WB face characters or Party of Five, Nev Campbell, in a horror film, um, you can get the young audience in there. And it really revived the slasher genre. So that too is also why he's a master of horror. because he made it big in the 80s. He fucking made New Line what it was until it tanked and Time Warner bought it, and he brought back the the summer like blockbuster horror film that all your friends had to go to, and it was a horror franchise, and that would spawn things like I Know You Did Last Summer and
Oh
Bloody
God, yeah,
Valentine and
yeah.
it's countless imitations. What was the other one? That weird urban legend. Remember that one? Based on
Final
Bloody
Destination.
Mary. Yeah, Final Destination. Like just getting young, cute, hot actors
Oh,
into
and
horror films.
Jeepers Creepers.
Well, not so much that one.
Jeepers
Creepers.
Creepers.
Where'd you get them peepers? So yeah, so a man whose films can influence the industry to that level to make others say we have to copy this shit immediately. To me, garners the moniker Master of Horror. Undoubtedly.
When you rented Scream at the Blockbuster,
Uh-huh.
what section was it in? Because this was a very interesting story for me.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think back. Because at this time my brother worked at Blockbuster. So he would bring shit home. But I would call on my trips there that it was I don't think it was in the horror section.
It was in comedy.
Oh my god, I think you're right.
It was considered a
I
dark
think
comedy.
I think you're right. Because it was like a black comedy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, it had humor and blood on equal levels.
Mm.
So
Was it the
I do
first one
see
where
that.
somebody got caught in a garage door?
Oh, what's her face?
That was horrible.
Her name was Tatum, but what's the actress's name? She's so fucking annoying. Rose McGowan.
Oh, Rose McGowan. Yeah. She got
That was let me go through
stuck
a
in the like
doggy
kitty door,
a
the
doggy
dog door,
door.
and oh, so good.
But
So good.
again, how would it even lift off the ground that garage door with the weight of her on it? Is that real?
Because they turned off this failsafe, right? Didn't they
Just,
get
he
the
just he
failsafe
just
off?
turned
So
it on. He just turned it on, dude. He flipped the switch.
oh, I don't know. I just assumed that he turned something off.
She threw beer bottles at him. He was on the ground.
Like tink.
Yeah, and she could have just stabbed him with a broken bottle,
Or
but she
anything.
but she beelines for the doggy door. It boggles the mind.
If there was a murderer,
Then again, that could
yeah,
be a play on the dumb
the dumb,
choices
yeah,
that
yeah.
people make in horror films every
Well, the
time.
whole opening of that movie was a dumb choice. Like
Right,
going out to investigate the thing, the door closing behind her.
right.
That was so good. Oh man, seeing
Oh,
her
you know what I
boyfriend
love?
sitting in the chair,
Oh,
getting his
no.
stomach sliced open. Oh, so good.
Did you watch the uncoat the intestine spill out?
Yeah, yeah.
So the best part of that opening scene is when the killer slash stabs um her in the throat and she can't speak
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and
Horrifying.
she has the phone and her parents on the other line
Yeah.
hearing her being killed and she goes mom and you can barely hear it. It just ekes through her
Yeah.
non-voice and it's just such great delivery.
That was somebody famous, right?
Yeah, that was Jesus fucking Christ.
Blonde.
I just said her name from Charlie's Angels.
Oh,
Oh my
Drew
God.
Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going all Biden. I can't remember shit.
I mean, that was like a really, really well performed
Oh,
death.
and you know what that refers to, by the way?
The calls are coming from inside the house.
No, well, there's that, of course. But Tina, who was the first death in Nightmare on Elm Street, who was on the ceiling, being dragged across the ceiling by
Uh-huh.
Freddie. And awesome. It was a rotating room set. Um she you would think, given she's the blonde, that she's the lead character, but she's the red herring.
Right.
And you kill her off quick. Going by the poster art and and the actor names, you would think she's a lead character,
Right.
Drew Barrymore, but she was killed within fucking 10 minutes of the movie.
Brilliant.
That's another Wes move right there, to kill off your presumed lead early on.
All right, take us out.
Oh boy, so that's gonna do it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. It's been, how long has it been? How long did we go on for? 2
Hour and a half.
hours?
Hour and a half. 1 hour and 30 minutes and 31 seconds.
Oh, I'm losing my voice, just
We're
like Drew
doing good.
Barrymore.
We're doing good.
Corona. All right, we gotta plug some stuff. You can follow us and this awesome show on the Twitter. We are at NDS Podcast. I am at Pants Guy, and Steven's at BatChild27. You can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/group/NDS Podcast. We're also on YouTube. We have a thing now of official URL.
Yeah.
We are youtube.com/dual screens TV. Also on Twitch, which we should be doing more Twitch stuff, I think.
We got to.
We got
That's
to.
for sure.
That's another avenue we got to do more of. Listen, we couldn't do so much in a day. We're two guys on this fucking podcast. We're doing hands-on previews, interviews, 2 podcasts a week, sometimes 3. We're at twitch.tv/dual screens streams. Thank you as always to our amazing contributors, Zazu Pitts, Matt Murray, Dan Colonna, and Andrew Douglas, who do all of our shit, from our art to our music to our overlays to our logos. It's all them. They're all the people that make us who we are. And finally, don't forget, you can email us at feedback@ndspodcast.com. I want to know, what is your favorite Wes Craven film, and which is your favorite Nightmare and your worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie?
There you go.
And you can support all this lovely content you get from us each and every week by going to patreon.com/NDS podcast. And that's it, folks. Steven, any closing remarks? Did you learn a lot today?
I did. I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I learned that I kind of want to watch Scream again.
You should watch the Scream. We could do a Scream watch-a-thon and do a commentary if you want.
Oh, that'd be fun. A little Patreon exclusive.
We should watch the first 4 films, and if that goes well, we should watch the horrible MTV series.
You know what we could do? We could do a Patreon exclusive series of NDS
Us watching movies.
NDS rewatch, where it's just we watch horror and we rank them.
Right.
That'd be cool.
We're doing this.
Kind of funny does something like that, where they take a like they did MCU in review and all that stuff. But I want to kind of do it more like,
I think horror is like where we're at. I would bring you so much franchise to watch. Right.
I want to do like
Freddie's, the Chucky's, the Jasons, the Michael Myerses, the Leatherfaces.
Yeah.
All the essentials.
Yeah. So next week is our last
Hellraisers.
episode.
Yes.
And I'm gonna throw a curveball at you, because I know we've been talking about what we would want that to be.
You keep doing this to me.
But
I'm gonna go Freddie on your ass.
Here is the topic.
Oh boy.
You get to teach me something I don't know about. Whatever you want to teach me, whatever it is that you think I don't know anything about, you could pick it.
We're not doing the gays?
No.
I'm not going to explain the gays?
No. And the reason why is that, like, I feel like that could be a very quick, like, here's just a few things.
Uh-huh.
And I also don't I also know quite a bit about that whole thing, because like I have, family.
Listen, if I were to say the words like twink, twonk, otter, bear, tank, power bottom, verse, top, I'm sure you know what most of these things mean.
could figure most of that
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of
But I
his,
kind of
his,
I
his
want you to now, because like I've
pup.
always sprung something on you and said, here, this is what I want to do. So I want you now to be in complete control. You know what you're passionate about. There are a bunch of games that you love. There are a
Mhm,
bunch of movies you love. Maybe a TV series that you
mhm,
love.
mhm.
Perhaps this Castlevania Netflix show I have yet to watch. I don't know. I don't know. There's plenty
You
of
gotta get
options
on
for
that.
you.
You have to get on that show.
Plenty of options for you.
Okay. All right.
All
So
right.
I have a week to figure this out for a season finale.
Yes. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, if you want to see, if you want to listen to Steve Explains It All, I did do a Steve Explains It All of professional wrestling on our Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/NDS podcast and you support us at any tier, you get all the bonus episodes. And that one was a doozy. That was a lot of fun. And we almost did another one this month, but it was voted on to do something different where I was almost going to explain um, Dragon Ball Z to Andy. So maybe we'll do that in the future. But we love
Maybe.
you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, listener. And as always, please be excellent to each other.